Dear friends, in our previous episode, we were trying to touch upon some of the lesser known but brilliant Indic minds with regards to the intellectual fervor that was still very much alive in this land in the second millennium AD, in spite of all the invasions and the loot and plunder and the disruption with the civilizational fabric. Today, we will just continue to take a few more names just in order to demonstrate this fact about how, in spite of all the physical and material abuse that the civilization went through, at an intellectual level, the fervor continued to remain bright and absolutely amazing. Another name that we cannot not mention is Madhvacharya, a great mathematician and also another great philosopher, who then proposes the philosophy of Dvaita, the duality. Madhvacharya, he was the chief proponent of the Dvaita school of Vedanta, duality. He toured India several times, visiting places such as Badrinath, Bengal, Varanasi, Dwarka, Goa, and Kanyakumari, engaging in philosophical debates and visiting Hindu centers of learning. He was a critique of both Shankaracharya's Advaita and Ramanujacharya's Vishishtadvaita. In Advaita, as per Shankara, the individual soul and the supreme soul, called the Brahman, are one and the same, is only a veil of ignorance, and with knowledge one can be enlightened to remove this veil and become one with the Supreme, in order and that would be the final bliss. Ramanujacharya added a different dimension to it. He brought in Vishishtadvaita, qualified monism. He philosophized that the individual soul and the supreme soul are one and the same but have distinct identities, and that for the individual soul to merge with the supreme and attain total bliss, there needs to be an element of devotion. That is where he sowed the seeds of the bhakti uh, school of thought. Then Madhvacharya, he came and he critiqued both of them, wherein he said the supreme soul and the individual soul are not the same. According to him, the supreme soul was completely independent and lived in its own bliss, whilst the individual souls were completely dependent upon the Supreme Soul and would attain bliss only by the grace of the Supreme Soul, for which the individual soul has to display a complete and total surrender and devotion, and also through good karma, to the extent that certain malefic souls who release a lot of bad karma are condemned to remain in that same state without even attaining bliss. He even went on to say that the individual souls all experience different levels of bliss depending upon their levels of devotion and their karmic actions. Madhvacharya wrote 37 texts on Dvaita and many other books on related subjects and topics. He established 8 mathas in Udupi in Karnataka, which is in India. And he greatly influenced Vaishnavism and the Bhakti movement. Madhvacharya is known to have performed many miracles. He even converted tamarind seeds into gold coins. Once he was meditating at the Malpe beach. It's currently called Malpe. It's a beach in Udupi. A storm broke out and a merchant ship that had sailed from Dwarka was passing through, and the owner of the ship was in panic. When he saw an ascetic meditating, he cried out aloud, hoping that his voice will carry over, asking for help. It is said that Madhvacharya, upon seeing that, just waved his saffron robe and the storm calmed down. The ship was saved, and the merchant, out of gratitude, offered Madhvacharya some gift, which Madhvacharya declined, saying he needed nothing. However, learning that the ship had sailed from Dwarka, he asked him if he had some clay from Dwarka. Dwarka during those days had a unique kind of clay that merchants used to load on their ships to be used as ballast in order to bring stability to the ship. So when Madhavacharya asked for that clay, the merchant gladly gave it to him. Madhavacharya carried this lump of clay into Udupi and cleaned it in a lake. Upon removing the layers of clay, he found embedded in it a idol of a young Krishna, which is unique in the whole country. The idol of Krishna is holding a churning stick and a rope. He then installed this in a temple there, and that is what is the famous Sri Krishna temple in Udupi. Even the lake where he was bathed and the clay was removed is present in the temple complex. That Sri Krishna temple has another very interesting event associated with it. A few centuries later, another great devotee, Kanakadas, he arrived at the temple but was denied entry being a stranger. Pained at being denied entry, he sang the praises of the Lord throughout the night, and the next morning he tried to get a glimpse of the deity from the wall behind the temple. It is said that certain cracks developed in the wall, and through the gaps, Kankadas was actually able to glimpse the deity, and the deity of Lord Krishna turned 180 degrees and faced him so that he could get a darshan. A proper window was constructed where the crack had appeared, and since then the idol faces west. Now you know that all the deities in all the temples in India are always facing east, but in this one it is facing west to this day. And that window is called Kanaka Khindi. Even today, when devotees arrive there, they first take darshan through the Kanaka Khindi and then they go to the main temple and take a darshan otherwise from that side. So, yes, there are many, many such great names, all of whom have contributed immensely to the culture and the enrichment of our Indic civilization. Sri Raghavendra Swami is another enlightened soul our land has been blessed with. He was born in 1595 and took Samadhi in 1671 at the age of 76. For 50 years, he was the Pitadhipati of the Kumbakonam Matha, which later on began to be called as the Mantralaya Sri Raghavendra Swami Matha. Located in Mantralayam, the Matha is a Dvaita Vedanta monastery descended from Madhavacharya. Sri Raghavendra Swami propagated the same Dvaita philosophy, and as was the fervor within the intellectual community of the Indic civilization, he held numerous debates at many places across South India. And the debates were usually with the Advaitins. So it would be Advaitins versus Advaitins, so that their philosophy, their reasoning, their thinking would only keep on getting sharpened by the sharpest of minds. Over 40 works have been attributed to Sri Raghavendra Swami. Apart from these works, he has authored commentaries on the Upanishads, the first three chapters of Rigveda called Mantra Manjari, and Bhagavad Gita. He entered Samadhi alive at Mantralayam on the banks of the Tungabhadra river. Before he took Samadhi, he told his disciples, I will be with you for the next 700 years. You may interpret that as you wish, but I will share with you here a remarkable incident that happened in the year 1800, more than 125 years after his Samadhi. Sir Thomas Monroe, he was appointed the governor of Madras Presidency in 1820. Before that, he was collector of Bellary in 1800. The Madras government had then ordered him for the restitution of the lands of the Mantralayam. When the revenue officials were unable to comply with this order, Sir Thomas Monroe visited the mutt. He removed his hat and shoes and entered the sacred precincts. Sri Raghavendra Swami emerged from the Vrindavan and conversed with him for some time about the withdrawal of the restitution. The saint was visible and audible only to Monroe. The collector went back and wrote an order withdrawing the restitution, and this notification was published in the Madras Government Gazette in chapter 11, page 213, and he had also transcribed his conversation with Sri Raghavendra Swami, and that has been preserved to date. There's another name that I would like to bring to your attention, and that is of Ganapati Muni. He is much more recent. He's in the 19th century, in the 1800s, and again, a greatly exalted soul, and his contributions have been numerous. Ganapati Muni was born in Andhra Pradesh in 1878, and he took Samadhi in 1936, so fairly recent. He had even met Sri Aurobindo, but he was a disciple of Brahmana Swami, whom he named as Sri Ramana Maharishi. Ganapati Muni was like a prodigy right since his childhood. In his early 20s, he participated in a literary contest in Bengal, and he was awarded the title of Kavyakantham. He was also an Avadhanam. And do you know what an Avadhanam is? Avadhanam is a special kind of a person who can take on 1,000 scholars at the same time and respond to them in real time. It could be 1,000 scholars, it could be 100, it could be 8. What happens is these numerous scholars pose questions to this person and he keeps answering them. Sometimes they will reference a particular stotra or a particular poem, and the second one will reference a second poem, the third one will reference a different poem, and the fourth one, and so on. And you have to then repeat the first line of each of those poems in that order, then go back and repeat the second line in that order, and then repeat the third line, and so on. Sometimes they'll put a condition that you should not use a particular syllable, so he will have to omit the syllable and still keep reciting the poems. And during all this, there's another person who's distracting you with silly banter. Again, not exactly silly, but then something that's on a lighter note, and you got to manage that too. Then, whilst all this is going on, there's another person who is ringing a bell, and you have to remember the number of times the number of dongs the bell has rung, and all this you have to do it. That means you calls for a phenomenal prowess, means awesome memory, and then great erudition in the subjects that you're talking about. And these were called as avadhanams. And do you know that even to this day we do have some avadhanams? But then they're greatly neglected, and it is such a pity that our civilization has completely forgotten about this great skill that is such a mental accomplishment which comes from a guru shishya parampara or through great tapas, and we are slowly losing this talent that was part of the Indic civilization. Ganapati Muni wrote an enormous volume of works during his lifetime. He wrote on stotras, he wrote kavyas, darshana, philosophy, nyaya shastra, logic, ayurveda, jyotishastra, bhashyam, commentaries, and novels and letters, etc. His greatest work is Uma Sahasram, a thousand verse praise of Ma Shakti. Actually, he was concerned about India, and he knew that when Indians gain their freedom, they will need a very strong foundation. So he even wrote a proposed constitution for India,
and he called it the Samrajya Nibandhanam. And this constitution in Sanskrit is being translated by Dr. Sampadananda Mishra. And we can wait to see what great wealth of knowledge we might gain from that, because that would be a solid foundation for the Indic civilization going forward.
He was deeply pained by the condition of the people under the rule of the colonialists, the British, and he knew that eventually the freedom will come. But when the freedom comes, he needed to prepare the people for it. And to that extent, can you believe it? He's even written and kept a written document as a constitution, which must be adopted by the people. And this constitution is written in Sanskrit. So these are only some of those great names that we have touched upon today, but the Indic intellectual landscape has been dotted with many such. And as we enter deeper into the colonial times, you will see that how even that pressure has come to bear upon us, and we shall deal with that as we go along. Please keep watching, my friends, and do subscribe. Thank you very much for your interest. Jai Hind.